Hi there, my name is Lisa. I'm the author of Cool Flowers, the Virtual Book Study, and this is your bonus question week. I have gone through and selected some of the questions that have been posted and going to address them here this morning. But first I want to thank everybody for posting the questions. I know how hard that is sometimes to reveal yourself, but there are no dumb questions, and I just really appreciate you all doing that. There is one group of questions that I'm not going to address in this video because we're going to do a future video on that because there was so much interest, and that's talking about cover cropping in your garden or in your farm also, on your farm. So look for that coming in the coming weeks, but we're going to look at some of these other questions. So the first one I have is from Joanne, and she asks, when you plant in fall, do you start seeds indoors? And the answer to that question is yes. We start some seeds indoors, and then we also plant some seeds out in the garden. And so as we discussed in the seed starting video, we try to give the seed what they require to have the quickest and easiest success. Some seeds really need to be planted out in the garden, and some seeds really prefer to be planted indoors. So we just follow whatever the seed dictates instead of kind of more than what I want to do. So you really just have to give the seed what it wants, the method it wants, and it really makes it super, super easy. So we have another question here from Heidi, who lives way up north. She is in Zone 3, so that's like Canada probably, or maybe at the very top of the most northern part of the United States. And her question is, how can Cool Flowers help me? She's right in her assumption that there's very little, if anything, that she can plant in the fall or during winter. However, people that live in these colder zones, Zone 2, Zone 3, Zone 4 even, have to wait so long in spring before they can plant warm season, tender annuals, the zinnias and sunflowers. Their growing season is so much shorter than ours because they plant late, and then of course their first frost comes even earlier than ours. So they have a much smaller window of opportunity. So Cool Flowers perhaps benefit them even more than they do the rest of us, because this group of flowers, what we have to remember, everybody can plant hardy annuals. We all just plant them at different times depending on where we live. So those people in the really cold, really heavy snow load areas would plant cool season hardy annuals in that period of time before you can plant your warm season annuals, 6 to 8 weeks before your last frost. For those of you that have heavy snow load during that time, I'm not going to go into the crazy ways you could perhaps prepare an area in fall and make it so you could get the snow off of that area to plant in early spring. I'll let your imagination go with that, but we have swept 12 inches of snow off of our prepared beds on a sunny afternoon to plant our warm season, our tender, cool season annuals. So for those of you that are in the north, it's the early spring planting that brings you the most benefit, getting your cool season stuff in the ground even earlier, since once you have prepared your soil and the spot the fall before, so you're ready, have it ready and waiting for it. And so I have a question here from Teresa. Do you grow in raised beds? And in fact, we do. I learned the hard way about not growing in raised beds. One year, many, many years ago, when I was making all my beds by hand, 100-foot long beds with a shovel and a tiller. And there came a time in the summer when I thought, you know what, I'm just not even going to make a raised bed. I'm just going to plant. And then we had like 2 days of nonstop rain, and it totally drowned my plants. Now, those plants that I had that were planted in raised beds from earlier in the season definitely struggled, but they didn't drown and die. By just having a 4 to 6 inch lifted bed, higher's even better. that allows the roots to be lifted up, and it just drains so much better. Other benefits of raised beds: the bed warms up earlier in the spring, and it just provides excellent drainage, and it gives you an option to save your plants. If you happen to have one of those famous Virginia Mid-Atlantic monsoon events that just drowns the garden, and it creates a place for the water to go to. So yes, raised beds, no matter your conditions, really can be beneficial, and your roots of your plants just really, really love it. So Suzanne asks, should we be starting seeds 10 to 12 weeks before first frost? My frost is October 12th. So what she's asking is, how far before the target planting date should she start seeds? And that really all depends on how quickly. I don't know how you're starting seeds, Suzanne. For us, for soil blocking, we tend to grow a little quicker. So we start 6 weeks before our target plant date. So if your first frost is mid-October, then your plant date is the 1st of September, which means you should be starting seedlings at least mid-July, which I realize that may have already passed. So that means hop to it. Better to plant late than never. So I definitely think it's worth going for it now, but for your planning for next year, you need to count back your weeks. And I will just point out here, in Cool Flowers, I talk about how I live off of a farming calendar. It's this big calendar. You can see it in the book that we write everything, and it's this exact type of information that I put on there. Do you think that if I lived where you live, Suzanne, in mid-July, I'd be thinking, oh, it's time to start hardy annuals? I wouldn't. But because I look at that calendar every day that I go before I go into the garden to see what I'm supposed to do, that's what tips me off. So having that calendar hanging in a place that you can't miss it, it's big, has big blocks so you can write everything you need to write, really keeps us on track. So that's how you keep yourself on point. So this next question is kind of the same thing from Annette. What timing do I go by for starting indoors? So we just kind of went over that. Again, it really depends on your seed starting method. If you're using a method that takes 8 to 10 weeks to get a nice 3 to 5 inch seedling, then that's what you need to do. In my situation with soil blocking, it only takes us 6 weeks. So you really have to kind of look at how your seed starting and gauge your best close proximity. And I will say, perhaps one of the real benefits of having a grow room instead of a greenhouse is really fully experienced when I'm starting seeds this time of the year. I mean, we love hardy annuals. What better job is there to do on a farm than to go into the air-conditioned building and start seeds in August? It's awesome. Our grow room, which we actually keep closed so the air conditioning is not directly in there, but it does stay cooler and we can leave the door open, and that's what we do for hardy annuals. When we're starting warm season stuff, we keep the door shut and it gets really hot in that room. But this time of the year, we leave the door open and it stays about 75 degrees in that room, and that enhances germination. We still use a seedling heat mat, which is necessary to have good germination. However, the room temperature is cooler. So for those of you that I've seen chatting about having struggles with the heat, you might want to consider moving at least your germination station into your home where it's air conditioned, then move them out to your greenhouse once they've germinated. They can take a little bit more heat then. So Nan asks, she said, as an example, if I was going to plant snaps and my frost date is October 15th, by planting the transplant target date is September 1st, do I start, and it takes 10 to 14 days to germinate them, I start on August 15th, right? And no, that is not right. Because if your target date is September 1st, you're going to start however many weeks in advance of that September 1st date for you to have a nice transplant to go to the garden. So again, depends on how you grow. For me, that would be 6 weeks. So 6 weeks from September 1st is mid-July. So again, you have to use that calendar. And I understand who was thinking about starting snapdragons in mid-July. Nobody. So you have to have a calendar that really brings you on. So here's a question from Adrienne. She's asking, she's making some raised beds, and she wants to know the ratio of compost to add to the soil to fill those beds up. So if I was making raised beds with like wooden sides, so you're not pushing soil up in the garden like you do in a big commercial garden, you kind of just smush all the soil that would be in your pathways up to a bed. She's making a box and then she needs to fill it up. I would say that a third compost, good quality compost, to 2/3 either good garden soil, and I will tell you, it's pretty impossible to purchase topsoil that's worth purchasing. If I was making home garden beds, I would buy bales of potting soil with no chemicals in it and add a third compost to that 2/3 potting soil, and then add organic dry fertilizer according to, the square footage that you have according to directions. Out in a garden space, if you're not building boxes and you're going to be shoveling soil to raise a bed, then it's 2 to 4 inches like we talked about in achieving soil. It doesn't matter how much compost costs. It's the best investment you make. So don't go easy on the compost. And I think I have one more question here, actually 2 more. So Anne asks, the best way, this really doesn't address cool season flowers, but we're going to talk about it anyway. The best way to enrich soil in permanent beds. I've heard 2 things. I've heard this question in like a perennial border. How do you beef up your soil each season? And also, people have asked me, how do you enrich the soil once you've laid landscape cloth down? Landscape cloth is that fabric that is permanent. Well, it's not permanent. It doesn't break down. And we don't use that at all in planting beds. We do use it in pathways, but we don't leave it down permanently. We put it down for several months and then we take it up, because you cannot enrich the soil under landscape cloth. You have to remove it at the end of that crop season and enrich your soil. So that's why it's not good for permanent plantings like landscape beds. We don't use it and don't recommend it. But if you have a permanent planting, let's say a mixed border, shrubs, some perennials, some bulbs, that your soil is needing some help, you don't have to dig everything up. That garden fork that you see me use in the book, in the bottom of the hole to punch it in the ground and rock it and make cracks and openings, you can do that throughout the bed without going into the immediate root area right around a plant. Go all throughout the bed, punch the fork, rock it, lift it up. After you're done, put down a couple inches of compost. You can still top it with mulch to make it look nice if it's a landscape bed. But doing that once a year for a couple of years will so enrich your soil, increase moisture retention, open the soil up for microorganisms and good ground bugs and all those kinds of great guys to get in there and work, and your plants will love you. And then the last question is from Mariah, who asked, do you add lime? And we're going to revisit that. I think it's week 4 is the soil improvement chapter. We only add lime when a soil test tells us to. Each year we add compost, general purpose organic fertilizer at a little bit lesser dose than what they recommend, actually, because our soil is so rich from all the compost that we use. But we only add other minerals and substances when a soil test helps us. And I will tell you where organic flower farmers send, many here on the East Coast send their soil to, and there are other branches of this throughout the country. It's A&L Eastern Laboratories, and they tend to give you more of an organic solution for your soil problems. They're really nice. You can pick them up, call them on the phone when you get your test back. So it works just like when you send it to a university. They just have a different take on how to resolve your problems. So I hope this helps. Keep planting your questions. Keep posting your questions. And if they don't get addressed in the coming chapters, or if I'm not able to be thorough enough in my written answers on the website, we'll wrap up at the end and address those questions. A cover crop video will be coming in the next few weeks. And I thank you so much. And please don't forget to post your reviews on Amazon for Cool Flowers. It's really helping other people to see, oh, this book is different and what it's kind of all about. As well as, I'm going to ask you for something new this week, is to go to my website. You can post reviews on our products. Go to Cool Flowers in the store and post your reviews there. It really kind of helps, does the same thing as Amazon does, but it helps me more personally. So thanks, and we'll see you back here next week with the next chapter. Have a good one.